All right. For anyone who follows the world of video games, even passively, I might add, the number one thing you've been hearing about recently is budget Pokemon, also known as Palworld. Actually, to be completely honest, it's quite possible you haven't heard of this game, but let me put this in perspective a little bit. Palworld, developed by a company called PocketPair, is the biggest launch in Steam's history. Bigger than Elden Ring, bigger than Cyberpunk, bigger than any other game that has ever launched on the platform, period. And that's no small feat. The game is consecutively rising to higher and higher concurrent player peaks. Last count was over 1.8 million concurrent online players, and that's not even counting Game Pass. I'll go out on a limb here and say that Palworld is quite likely to become the best selling video game of all time, perhaps. But that's not the only reason why you've likely heard of it. I made a joke and I called it budget Pokemon, but that's precisely what the game is. It's budget Pokemon with action combat, survival crafting elements, and a Valheim esque type of world. It's fun for a while, and I kind of get why it's finding success. Sure, I'll probably review it, and if I were to pump out information videos on it and do guides for the game, I'd probably make tens of thousands of dollars a month for the next year, which is tempting. But today, I want to talk about why the game is not just the most popular release in history, but also dragged down by controversy and outrage at every single turn. There's a number of complaints, but I'll try to put them in order. The first and largest one, in my opinion, is that Palworld was allegedly created with the help of generative AI programs. Some people say the game itself was made that way, others claim just the creatures were, but what's really going on? Well, for starters, people think that because one of the prior games that the developers of Palworld came out with was called AI, standing for Art Imposter, where generative AI and artwork comprised the central pillar of the gameplay loop. That obviously raises some eyebrows, but then people started to showcase how the CEO of PocketPair was an AI enthusiast of sorts. They dug through his tweet history, found some really odd statements about generative artwork, such as this one about how passing something through an AI filter might resolve the issue of copyright, go figure. But the thing that really made my eyebrows raise was this. There's a blog post from shortly before the game's initial launch bragging about how there are 100 monsters in the game, but it also talks about how basically all of the characters were designed by a single graduate student who the company hired off of Twitter. Now, that's obviously non conclusive, but a company that was struggling to do even basic design elements before this, managing to produce the scale of content that they have, is raising questions. Still, I want to be crystal clear about this. There is no current definitive proof that the company has utilized generative AI. There's a horde of people speculating about it on social media, but they really just do not know right now. And personally, I think it's a very important line. Not many people care about that line, obviously. If the game is fun, they'll play it, but I think it is an important line in reality to a degree because it would showcase a new leap in AI usage for video games. See, it's a very tricky topic because when you talk about AI in video games, you're talking about things like procedural generation, which have been used in games with varying degrees of success for many, many years. AI enhancing those kinds of tools, that seems great, really, but AI replacing creative jobs in the conceptual department, that's not so good. Anyway, that's a topic for a different video because according to GDC survey data, 31% of all game developers are now using generative tools, AI tools that is. 18% say their colleagues do, and 15% say they're interested in doing so. That's a rapidly growing majority, by the way, that is either actively using it or wanting to use it. I've actually got an entire dedicated video, I'll link it down below in the description for those interested, on why copyright itself may be the Achilles heel for generative AI programs, featuring the Midjourney lawsuit, artist scraping lists, etc. So it really is a developing situation with a bunch of heavy-hitting players involved, all of whom have a lot of money and a vested interest in the outcome. Regardless, that was the first hurdle for budget Pokemon, but now the discourse has shifted to plagiarism. This part's kind of tricky. See, there are a metric shit ton of people weighing it now, doing side-by-side comparisons, looking at the shapes, the polygons, the 3D models, everything. It's a hornet's nest because there is a very large group of people that are now deeply upset because they believe that Palworld stole designs from Nintendo. And I'm not really here to take sides today, I don't think, but some of the similarities are, they're rather striking. It's very heated, by the way. Senior artists at other development firms, like Naughty Dog, for example, saying things such as, I don't have any proof, but my gut tells me they are cheating somehow. Just fanning the flames of outrage over these rip-off Pokemon. And I really can't sit here and tell you, yeah, those models got copy-pasted and then changed, or those models got traced, or no, they're similar but not the same, because I have very little experience in 3D modeling. I have some experience, but not enough to be an authoritative expert. That being said, there are so many different similarities in theme, detail, structure, and archetype, it's obvious that the game intended to capture the same audience as Pokemon and give them something super familiar. It's intentional. Whether or not that level of intention constitutes something Nintendo can sue over is a different story, but they're probably gonna sue. I say that because Nintendo have already started nuking the Pokemon themed mods for Palworld, and the former head of legal for Pokemon, Dan McGowan, speaking to GameFile, has already said, quote, "This looks like the usual rip-off nonsense that I would see 1,000 times a year when I was chief legal officer of Pokemon. I'm just surprised it got this far," end quote. Nintendo can likely draw on a bevy of different examples for this if they decide to go the legal route. Shout out to Eric Covington for these examples here, which point towards the idea that a video game's look and feel may be protected under existing copyright law, and also that confusion created among an audience can be used as justification for why a work is infringing. There's a couple different cases that might set a precedent, but that's, again, a bit of a tangent. Now, the degree to which Palworld falls into those categories will probably get litigated through the court system. That's just the honest to God truth. Or settled in some high pressure back room between a bunch of powerful people or, some high paid lawyers. I honestly can't be sure. But the monumental success of Palworld and its undeniable similarities make it a prime target for Nintendo, who is also, historically, kinda sue happy. Here's the thing. Obviously, none of this matters when it comes to selling power. The game is flying off the proverbial shelves, if you will, which means that there are resources being generated that could be used to turn this product into an actual behemoth of a franchise or a piece of IP. Pokemon and Digimon have been feuding for decades, so what's to stop this one from becoming yet another titan of the weird-looking little creatures you catch video game scene? Probably nothing. The CEO of PocketPair obviously has responded to all of this, saying that the game has passed legal reviews and that they take it all very seriously, etc., etc. But this is the same person who is saying he cares less about originality and cares more about being popular. Speaking to Wired Japan, CEO Takuro Mizobi said, quote, "I've always loved Nintendo games, and that hasn't changed. I deeply respect him. However, when it comes to making games, Nintendo has a strong philosophy of creating new and unique games with high quality, and this was questioned at the Nintendo Game Seminar. On the other hand, I have a deep-rooted desire for my work to be enjoyed by as many people as possible, and to that end, if there are good ideas in the world, I pick them up, and I don't necessarily have to be particular about originality. I think it would be a good idea to create things in a way that just jumps on what is trendy," end quote. Combine that with prior statements on social media about how he quite literally can no longer tell which ones are Pokemon and which ones are AI generated versions of Pokemon, while showcasing examples of Pokemon esque replications. That's a pretty compelling set of dots to connect if you're a lawyer trying to argue that the wildly popular new pet catching game stole concepts from your wildly popular pet catching game. It's a very fine line between the legal quagmire of outright asset theft and a perfectly legal off brand style ripoff. And one thing standing tall right now, as a testament to the game's potential future, is Craftopia, a game also developed by PocketPair. Craftopia is very clearly inspired, right, to use that word in a very general sense, by Zelda Breath of the Wild, with a multitude of elements seemingly lifted directly out of the game, but it was made, sold, and subsequently played by a lot of people over the span of years, only now getting review bombed because it has seemingly been abandoned in favor of Palworld. There were no lawsuits that I could find, at least, and the game persisted as a not so different but kinda different gameplay experience ever since 2020, making it much more believable that Palworld will find its way forward without getting sued into oblivion by Nintendo necessarily, despite the mountain of similarities and remarkably similar concepts. In summary, there is absolutely no hard evidence whatsoever that Palworld has used generative AI, but the CEO is very enthusiastic about that possibility and concept, having directly showcased and compared AI creatures to actual Pokemon in the past, and his studio also made an AI game before this that used artwork as the core concept. He's not a fan of originality. The PALs were mostly made by apparently a graduate student that the company hired off of Twitter, and the models are very similar in a few ways that will have to be sorted out by lawyers. The list of similar themes and creatures is very, very long, but the developers kinda already did that in the past once before, and they got away with it, making this a budget Pokemon ripoff, at least in my opinion. Those are my words, and again, just an opinion, that somehow became the most popular game release of all time and shows no signs of slowing down. It's fun for a bit, and depending how things go, I guess I could maybe do a review and a guide video, but I'm just not enthralled by this game to the extent that I would need to be in order to start actually covering it like I have for certain titles in the past as like a main game. It's fun, I get it. The developers even allegedly decided to make it Pokemon with guns because Americans like to shoot things, which made me laugh. And then also, Americans sometimes want to make very ugly characters, which made me laugh even more. I don't know if that was the actual motivation here for these development decisions, but it's funny. Anyway, that's it. Palworld, in my opinion, is budget Pokemon that is now simultaneously the most popular and most controversial game on the entire video game market, with an unknown future ahead of it, if it even has one. If you want to support, there are links down below. Update on the lawsuit refunds as well. They are processing right now through GoFundMe and their payment provider. Should be there end of this week. If you want to support the channel, links down below. Patreon and locals are the best ones, obviously, but also affiliate links. If you want a VPN, make sure you use our partnership down below or something like that. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching and have a nice night.